Welcome to the Mastering E-commerce Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Eitan Koter, co-CEO of Vimy. In an era of rising acquisition costs and increased competition, this podcast is dedicated to helping you drive sales, engage customers, and build meaningful communities so you can turn passive visitors into active buyers. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future content. Now let's get started with the episode. Welcome listeners, it's Eitan Koter, your host on Mastering E-commerce Marketing. Really special guest on our episode today, Matt Krueger, Vice President of Digital Commerce at East Point Sports. Matt, hey, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's great to connect. Looking forward to chatting today.
Yes, I mean, you're doing so much on e-commerce and been in the industry for quite a while, and obviously working with East Point in that position. It involves a lot of, obviously, multi-channel and digital channel, but obviously, the company is working also on an offline kind of marketing activities with brick-and-mortar retailers and all. So I'd like to, if you can start by sharing not your background, but why you're so passionate about e-commerce and retail, and what are the topics that you are really, wakes you up in the morning with a lot of this energy that you're showing up here today.
I appreciate it. And it's, like you said, I won't try to explain my background, but it really started, I never planned on coming into e-commerce. It just happened to, maybe no one does. But I love sports. I was an athlete growing up, but I also took marketing classes in high school, and I kind of fused this love and passion for sporting goods and business. And it just happened that in my hometown back in Wisconsin, one of the largest online pure play partners of its time within athletic goods was stationed there. So I started working in a retail store, and eventually got an internship, and I started just becoming obsessed with e-commerce. And, fast forward 10, 15 years later, what was being done back then has evolved so much more into what it is today. And I think that love and passion hasn't changed. I still love sports. I still love business. And regardless of whatever product I'm selling, I find a way to kind of put those two together. And I think that's just always hungry, always competing. And I feel like that's remembering where I came from is what fuels me every day to keep going to the future. And so I try to apply that methodology to any business that I work on.
Amazing. I talked to a lot of guests and also customers in the business, and everyone is so excited about e-commerce because it's changing always. It's very dynamic type of industry. But you started from loving sports, and you're combining sports and e-commerce, right, in East Point. And it's really amazing to hear and to see that you're combining like your two passions into this job. So I guess you're not feeling you're working, you're probably enjoying yourself. But hey, it's getting difficult out there, right? And a lot of things that worked in the past are no longer working anymore. So what are some of the key strategies that you believe are essential for driving growth, right, in the sports market or in general in e-commerce? Because we know things are changing and there are new ways to grow, definitely now and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the one thing that I love about this industry, right? It's always dynamic. If you ever feel like you're sitting still, I don't know if you really love this industry. But I think, like you said, it has changed a lot for the good. And I think the biggest thing I constantly have to remind myself is, you have to adapt, whether you want to or not. Otherwise, you will get left behind. But I think probably the biggest thing that I believe that has changed so much is, I started really focusing on, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but I feel a lot of people started in content and UX and, digital marketing and within paid search and email way back when. Those obviously are all still very relevant. But I think where it's came today is, there's more focus on the financials, the supply chain, logistics, optimization of fulfilling to the customer, both to them and back to the warehouse from a returns perspective, that I think it's almost more of an operations practice than it is on content, understanding the consumer, and really, meeting them where it is. I'm not saying that has gone away. but I feel like it's become much more balanced of a math exercise and I would say a customer acquisition marketing exercise. And I believe that's,
Yeah.
to me, if you want to grow in the future, you have to do both really, really well. And we'll see what morphs into in the future. But I think that's where the biggest change for me has came and what I think you need to do to grow.
Interesting. So just combining art and science, right, together into this into this flow. So it requires probably a change in the way you operate in terms of leading the team. Some of the internal processes. You mentioned that operation fulfillment is so important for business success, right? That's clear. And also a variety of marketing channels and marketing activities that you do. So how do you foster collaboration among those cross-functional teams, right, to achieve business goals eventually?
Yeah, I think it's very different, I think, depending on what type of business you're in. So, I'll speak more broadly, not necessarily about East Point or my previous experience, but I think it has
Sure.
changed differently. I would say the one thing I've tried to do is think about the teams that previously may have been thought of last. I don't want to say first, but in parallel. And what I mean by that is, within e-commerce, like we have maybe some grand old plans of a new digital marketing campaign or new product drops or whatever. And we've been so focused on either creative execution or, paid media plans, but we ultimately kind of forget of how that impacts our operations team or our customer service teams is like, hey, we go and do this massive campaign launch, but then it creates a downstream effect of questions, concerns, inventory challenges, whatever, that sometimes operations or customer service teams have to manage with. So I'm trying to bridge that gap earlier on so they're in the know. And that honestly has helped my team and myself tremendously because many times they bring up things that I've never thought about. And it has allowed us to be more flexible or pivot to go, hey, we were going to do this, but now we're going to do this because it's going to make it easier for the kind of holistic customer experience. Whether that's with retailers, direct to consumer customers, marketplace channels, whatever it may be. So I think that's the biggest thing of how I tried to force collaboration is think about people that may have not been thought about first. And that's no disrespect to any team members. It's just naturally that's sometimes how it comes. And so I've tried to bridge that gap so that everyone gets a holistic, voice at the table so that we can make the best decision prior to going live.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look a little bit more to the future and think about ways to grow and how to optimize internal processes, what are some of the more opportunities that you see that are available right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. Retail media, obviously, is going to be a key factor in growth moving forward. Obviously, as it continues to grow and more retailers, expand into this space, that is obviously a massive industry and becoming more methodical and a holistic approach. And now you have all different type of, multi-channel, I'm going to say multi-channel attribution, but, M&M, which I'm not familiar with all that much, but I'm starting to try and learn. But there's so many ways you're going to have to model out the value of media spend more than ever before. And I think that's going to be a key piece of growth moving forward and testing things that you might not have ever done before. So I think that's a key piece. Two, I think diversification is going to be key. And what I mean by diversification, it could be channel diversification. It could be product exclusivity diversification. It could be regional diversification. I think, we need to understand that the consumer is constantly changing. We know that, but how do you make sure that you're not too leveraged in one area and not over leveraged in other areas? So I think, constantly understanding what is the best method to sell for your business is key. And then the last piece I would say, just if I gave a top three, I think as e-commerce, we've had everyone in the industry is historically, we've kind of done an all for one approach where get every product online and try and sell everything. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not for my organization or for anyone out there, but I think we are going to have to be very strategic about, do we launch every product in every channel, and or be more specific about what's the correct product for that channel for that customer, and ensure that we do that very, very well, versus just kind of a blanket approach. Because I think it's as it gets more complicated and more focuses on the bottom line or top line, regardless of whatever sector you're in, it's really hard in a very complex channel to do that all very well for a total catalog. So I just think that's an idea that's kind of bouncing around in my head is, how much is too much, where you can't possibly manage it all.
So what is the process that you suggest just to analyze things and to take some small decision? And I know it's totally related to the size of the company and how, well known the brand is. So how do you, there are so many AI tools and technology platforms out there that enables you to just doing this multi-channel advertising or multi-channel streaming or multi-channel marketing. And it's not that complicated to do, but on the other hand, you need to focus on your ICP and your personas and try to target your shoppers where they're spending most of their time, right? So how do you take, smaller decision, multi-channel versus focus, right?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple different ways I look at it. One, you have to understand what your corporation goals are. Private versus public versus nonprofit versus private equity. Each one is motivated and driven by different focuses. I've fortunately worked in every sector, and each one was different. So I think that first and foremost, you have to understand what your corporation goals are, to pick and choose that starting basis. Number two is, I think you have to ultimately understand what those goals allows you to have for your resources. And what I mean by that is, if I wanted, I'll just give an example. I'm not saying currently, but in certain areas, I've had to look at my team and or resources and been like, you know what, I personally really want to sell and think there's value in selling these 4 or 5 channels. But my team and my financial resources and whatever it may be would be stretched very thin to do that. So I've almost had to put my personal bias backwards to understand, like, hey, we need to peel back and focus just on this 1 or 2 channels, or 10, 15, 20 products, and do this really well. Once we get that established, then we expand. So I would say that's just like a operational personnel perspective. And then 3, I think ultimately it comes down to the financials. Each category, each product, regardless of whatever industry you're in, there is some standards across different marketplaces or different DTC channels. But what is going to make the most sense for your business to operate the most profitably, but also still, to your point, meet the most consumers where they are. If that's Amazon, is it 1P, 3P, seller fulfilled Prime, direct fulfillment, MFN? Like, it could change whether you're selling furniture, whether you're selling essentials, whether you're selling electronics. It could be completely changed. So I really think you have to evaluate what is best for you, and instead of a blanket approach of like, hey, this worked in this category, now I'm in this one, let's just go do it. I just don't know if that's a sustainable business practice. So I think those are the 3 areas that you have to focus on first and foremost, and then apply those to whether it's retail media or analytics or fulfillment, whatever that may be.
Interesting. It seems that things that worked in the past are not 100% going to work today. Like, for example, Meta ads, right? Or Amazon advertising or activities. It's so, whether it's too competitive, or whether prices of CPCs are so high, it seems that there is a lot of focus on experimentation and trying to find what's working for each one of the brands, right? And that having that balance of earned media versus owned, and you cannot win everything through pouring money on ads, right? So this is, I think, a major change that obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Is this organic versus, paid, and this kind of you used to have one channel that you are committed to and it was great, but now you don't know. Maybe it takes six months. You focus on one channel, but it's not working, and you need to diverse, right? So that's, I think, another layer of complexity that we have these days.
Yeah, I think what you said, you know, a little bit in the middle there of accepting and understanding that you won't be able to own and be the experts in every channel anymore because there are so many channels. And
Yeah.
especially depending on certain categories that you play in, there's some massive businesses out there that have a lot of money to be spent that can just own those areas. So, you know, you really need to be thinking strategically of like, hey, it'd be great to be in these channels, but it's just so expensive. So you might have to be like, hey, this used to work. Let's go try this and see what happens. But I just think overall, the consumer has so many different outlets to learn about products these days that if you're not at least testing and trialing certain creative copy ad types, you're just missing out on brand awareness that would allow you to potentially grow your organic ranking over time, which everyone now is ultimately, because retail media is getting so expensive, everyone's like going back to the basics and be like, hey, how do I get my organic ranking to continue to grow? Because that's where we need to do to offset the retail media. So I think you're 100% spot on that if you constantly have to be testing to learn what may work, and not everything, you also have to be okay with not everything is going to work, but you will find a diamond in the rough at some point. And when you do, take advantage of it because you might be able to capitalize that really hits a home run in that short term.
Yes. And don't be afraid to cut losses and kill those activities that are not working, like lose early, right? As early as you can, right? And I mean, you remember also like 2 years ago, probably it was like Shopify is killing all agencies, right? And this is like straight to your point about all these communities that are getting specialized and no one knows to operate in all these channels. You know, you need help, you need expertise. This is why, you know, all this fractional everything, right, is like booming right now. All the fractional CXO kind of thing, and like working at the right agency. If you want to work on each one of those channels, you work with the right agency. It gives you the best, you know, advice and expertise around that. So that's important to mention that it requires, you know, working with external help, right, to figure out how to maneuver these new communities. And obviously you can't win them all, right? So that's one of the problem, but yeah, continue experimenting. Matt, I know you are doing a lot around marketplaces, right? And obviously things are changing a lot also on marketplaces,
Sure.
right? So it's not just 1P, 3P. There are so many ways to work with marketplaces. How do you see the evolution of, you know, of marketplaces out there?
It's an ever dynamic and changing industry. Obviously, you know, you have your major players domestically, and then you have your major players globally. I think it's somewhat interesting how there's coming some cross, you know, pollination between practices, you know, that started either internationally and now are coming domestically, or vice versa. So I think you're going to kind of continue to see that, but I think, you know, it's also because of the emergence of, you know, Temu and Shein and everything like that's just becoming more accessible into the US. So I think now, you know, specifically Amazon's releasing a low cost shop across the country. So I think, you know, especially in terms of, you know, where we're at currently with economic and inflation, economic conditions and inflation and everything like that, that price consciousness is really front and center for a lot of marketplaces in total. So I think that's one emerging trend. I think you're going to see more and more marketplaces come up. Again, you have to evaluate how much do you chase a shiny object, because until you really maximize the big ones out there, regardless of whatever is right as a big channel in your eyes, there's so much room for opportunity. Again, don't want to speak for anyone and only for speaking for myself, but I haven't found anyone yet that has, you know what, been like, I've cracked the top 3 or 4 or 5 marketplaces in my channel and no one can touch our business there. There's just not. So I think every time you think you get it, one of the marketplaces releases a new feature and it completely is game changing. So especially with the emergence of AI and, you know, faster tech and bigger analytics, there's just so much you can't really ever touch, in my opinion. So you constantly have to be ready. And so that doesn't mean you ignore these new marketplaces coming up, but you just got to pick and choose when's the right time for you to enter. And to your earlier point, most of them are pretty highly specialized. So you have to also be willing, do you need to hire internally or do you need to go external? And there's a pro and con to each. So I think that's just the cross-pollination of all these different marketplaces within their different specialties is going to continue to arise. But I still believe that the major ones out there, especially ones that maybe even who only started over 3-4 years, that's still the largest piece in the pie that you really want to be focused on. And I don't think that's going to change here for the coming years.
Yes. I mean, it seems that, I don't know what are your thoughts on this, but it seems that like the overall share of marketplaces revenues or GMVs is increasing in terms of the overall retail revenues, right? So that's probably using their power to market, in addition to the fact that acquiring new customers to your amazingbrand.com is getting more and more difficult, right?
Yeah. I mean, and marketplaces also, I do think one other point, and it goes related to this question, I do think there's more retailers, if retailers expand to brick and mortar or more brick and mortar expands to marketplaces, I do think this idea of test and learn is going to continue to growing. That's obviously not a new concept, but I do believe that it is a low risk way to find new trends, find new products. And I think that's going to continue emerging, and that's going to be a focus of some of the bigger retailers or marketplaces moving forward.
Nice. And you mentioned AI. I mean, what's working for you with AI today?
Where I would say I'm a novice when it comes to it, but I'm an enthusiast. I would say me personally, I'm dabbling it. We and my teams have not necessarily deployed anything, but we're leveraging tools that I would say other 3P partners, other retailers are deploying for their partners and testing and learning. I think the creative space is an intriguing one. From what I've seen, though, most of the AI creates 60 to 70% of what you actually can use, but there's still a lot of human intervention that needs to be done, both from a quality point of view, from a legality point of view, and overall just specific point of view that, what you're prompting and what comes up isn't necessarily one-to-one. So I think what's working, I believe out there from what I've heard from people is it's helping most people be faster at their roles, but it takes some time to get used to it. And then whenever the output is, you still need to, I would say, tweak it to make sure it works for your whatever your personal use or business use. And I think that's where it goes. The analytics portion, again, I'm not knowledgeable enough in that, but I do know there's a lot of good use cases to layer AI on top of analytics that's helping people analyze big data pieces much faster. Even things like sentiment analysis that you want to, run through 10,000 records of rows and you're just like, hey, review this and provide me an overview. Like it does that in 3 seconds, where it would take me probably 3 days to kind of get a good overview of that. So I think that's kind of where I see AI working for me and us right now.
So Matt, we're here to help other e-commerce leaders out there. And my next question is about maybe a challenge you had in the past, or probably something that today you would have done differently. Can you share an example of maybe an event or a challenge you faced, and probably, today you would have approached the solution completely in a different way?
Yeah. So really good question. I would say, not speaking to a specific event per se, but I'll give you the scenario of, I'm not sure I would have hired as heavily in a certain scenario, meaning bringing in multiple people all at once. I think I would have probably not slow played it, but I probably would have made 1 or 2 strategic experienced hires to help me evaluate what is needed, and then ultimately decide, all right, what do we build internally? What do we build externally versus just 100% building internally right away? And especially I say that now because of, to your earlier point of specialization, there's so many different channels that are so specialized and so complicated that a broad one-all approach doesn't really work anymore. So And I feel like had I thought a little bit through that, we probably could have been a little bit more flexible, more nimble and faster to market and not had to probably trip over ourselves a few times. In the end, it all worked out okay because we naturally grew fast enough that we could kind of make up for it. But I would say that'd be my biggest thing then and moving forward is I just want to be very thoughtful of where do we spend our resources so that it's a healthy balance moving forward. And listen, I love every team member. I've been very blessed to work with every person I've ever mentioned for. They've impacted me in a very positive way. I just think it's really hard for one person to know everything. And it's not fair to them and it's not fair to the business. So I think that's just something, put people in spots to win, and where you don't have expertise to win, look at potentially hiring externally to help you win in an area versus just trying to force someone down a rabbit hole that you may not know. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice.
Nice. Really, thank you for sharing that. I want to talk to you also about digital shelf strategy and how do you think it's impacting, consumer purchasing decisions?
And it's that the digital shelf has gotten more complicated than ever before. And obviously, retail media is probably impacting that the most just because of, how much was organic previously is now X amount less now. I think though, what we're seeing moving forward is the digital shelf is changing, but I still believe that the omni experience is still very valid. Customers walking in stores, searching online, ensuring that quality is there, pricing is there, reviews and feedback is there. I still think that's very relevant. And I don't want to say hasn't changed because it absolutely is growing and continues to grow. But I think that still principle of understanding the consumer journey and ensuring that your digital shelf is optimized is very much relevant. I don't know if I could be remiss and I could be wrong here, but I don't think that's changed in general. But I do think moving forward, little things that certain retailers are testing that could impact the consumer journey, the digital shelf, i.e., Amazon's testing pulling reviews and ratings off of the digital shelf and just going with quantities of purchasing. I think more manufacturers may be considering, do we need to do 2-day shipping FBA for everything? And it's like, do consumers really need everything in 2 days? I'm not sure. I think that thought and methodology is changing and what the digital shelf impacts purchasing decisions. So those are just little things that I think are going to evolve over time and will impact the consumer shopping journey. I'm assuming in a positive, but ultimately we could also learn and say some things just really were working, we shouldn't have taken away. So that's probably my crystal ball of kind of how it's impacting in the future, at least.
Yeah. And Matt, I know you are doing a variety of public speaking engagements, and can you share what are the topics that you usually speak about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a few podcasts. I haven't really gotten to any conferences lately because I have 2 children under 2 and it's very challenging to get away. But I think so I'm hoping to change that in the future. But I think many topics today are very relevant of what I talked about. Mostly I would say, profitable e-commerce is a very, very common one that I think, analyzing every SKU down to the X percent margin level is very common, more so now because we really didn't do that moving forward, unless you're a very sophisticated business. But I would say that's probably point number 1. Point number 2 is I think, the emergence of, this is again, not new, but something we're talking about, the emergence of commercial teams, data teams, tech teams, and operations teams. Like, you can't work in silos anymore to be successful moving forward. And again, large businesses have been doing this probably for years, but you have to all partner together to make sure that your businesses are the most efficient to succeed. So that's another one of this convergence of multiple departments and needs to be successful. And it's not account management. It's not forecasting. It's not marketing, all in these separate areas. Like, you really do need to work together to be one business unit to grow moving forward. That's probably number two, and then last piece I would say is global marketplaces is still a topic that I chat about.
Okay.
I'm a little less removed right now compared to my footwear days, but global marketplaces is absolutely a hot topic. And I think the biggest thing there is just the differences between domestic and global marketplace operations. And they are not all like an Amazon or like a Walmart. So you really do have to have a specific approach to each one. And I would say that's something that I enjoy and have a passion for too. So I would say those are the three topics that are most common.
Yes. In terms of the SKU analysis, what do you see? I mean, there's so much focus on operational efficiency and profitability of companies. So it's just making the strong stronger, just eliminating unprofitable SKUs, or just focusing on them, or what do you see is happening right now in the industry?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a component of it is, understanding what's profitable and what's not. And I do think, again, what might not be profitable online doesn't mean it's not profitable in stores or for your business. And it could be a very awesome product for your consumer. It's just understanding that you may not operate profitably now, but how can we make it profitable? Or, are we advertising too much? Is the packaging not optimized? Is it, we consider a different bundle perspective. So there's a lot of different ways that just because a product may not be profitable now doesn't mean it can't be in the future. But I would say in general, I think again, speaking broadly, in my opinion, I think a lot of prices that were set, over the last 10 years, I'm kind of discovering that maybe they might not have been set quite to the level they need to be to ensure profitable commerce. That's a hunch. But again, a lot of people, especially in the 3P landscape, have done a lot of analysis to ensure that they're operating profitable. But I just think that sometimes when the market's been dominated in certain sectors by either brick or distributors or whatever it may be, the distribution components and costs associated with that is much different than the online aspect of it. And when you lead with not necessarily considering all those inputs, you potentially may not be operating the most efficient way and profitable way possible. So I think this, for me, that's kind of when I talk with people in this industry, that's part of the challenge, but it's a challenge. It's not a death sentence. It's just, you have to figure out a way to make it profitable. And that's where this can get fun, because it's not just about advertising more. You can look at different packaging or different suppliers or different, fulfillment models. Like, that's where this business gets really fun and enjoyable, but you have to be willing to adapt. And that goes to our earlier point. So.
Nice. So probably as the last topic, I usually talk with my guests on a not work-related issues. So let's talk about your picture in the background. Please share with our audience.
I love that you asked it. I mean, so this Kobe Bryant's. I played soccer and basketball growing up. Basketball was my number one passion, and I didn't really grow up in the Jordan era much. I kept the tail end of it, but Kobe to me was kind of a lot of people's MJ, and his tenacity and ruthlessness and determination and work ethic was something I really admired. And, honestly, Kobe's a, controversial topic to some people, on who he was as a person or player. But for me, if I look that aside, I just loved his competitiveness of winning. And, I try, not that winning is everything, but I think as a part of e-commerce, you have to have a little bit of a competitive edge to, compete with these giants out there. So for me, he just was unbelievable on the court, and you don't see kind of that I don't care mentality. And that's why I love playing with that mentality. I love working with that mentality. And I hope that, with a moderate tweak, my kids get a little bit of that mentality in them, just to, life is hard, work is hard. And if you want to be successful, you need to have a little bit of an edge to really keep going. So that's the behind the scenes of that one. And my wife got it for me for a gift, and I'm very thankful for her for that.
Yes. And we also had a few years after he retired to listen to all his, I think, wisdom around business, around work and life, and some of his, you mentioned tenacity and the way he worked, and having this Mamba mentality, right? So that's very important. Wow, Matt, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and for all the great insights and values.
I appreciate it, Eitan. It's great to always chat. If I can ever help out, please let me know. And just appreciate you and sharing your knowledge with your audience. So looking forward to when we connect next time.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our future content. And if you could share this with just one person, it would make all the difference. Are you looking to accelerate your sales with the power of shoppable video? Explore Vimy, the video commerce platform that includes live shopping, shoppable video, and social commerce capabilities. Visit Vimy at www.vimy.net, that's VIMMI.net, where you can start with a free for life package. We appreciate your support and look forward for bringing you more valuable insights in our next episode.